Hello, and welcome to Handled Ish Productivity for the Imperfect, a weekly podcast for those who want to elevate their productivity but are not looking for perfection. I'm your host, Betsy Hayes, and I'm really glad you're here in podcast land or YouTube or on your KC24 CBS 47 Plus app that you can download from your smart TV or on CMAC.TV, the Community Media Access Collaborative. And as always, thanks to everyone for carrying the podcast. This is episode 109, How to Conference, or AKA Productive Conferencing. And this is a perfect opportunity to film this episode because I'm actually at a conference. I have several conferences this semester. By the time you see this, I will be back and prepping for the next one. So many of us, as part of our professional careers or even hobbies or different things we're involved in, have conferences that we attend. And we have probably all had positive, neutral, and negative experiences at said conference. And so I was really thinking as I was prepping for this particular one I'm at right now and wanting to make the most of it, and thought that that might be a fun thing to talk about in an episode of productive conferencing. And then also to see if you all would like to share some of your tips, because I think something that we do infrequently tends to not have as many routines or processes. And maybe we could kind of just have some loose thoughts that can really help maximize those opportunities. So here are my thoughts. Okay, first of all, packing. So, obviously, we want to check the weather wherever we are. And I know that sounds silly, but I know we've also all forgotten to do that when on a trip, going to a different location, particularly if it's a different state or country or anything like that. So we want to make sure that the clothing we pick are weather appropriate. And also, if there's any special things related to the weather, right? I've been to the southern United States in summer, and the humidity was a big factor, right? You go to different parts of the country or world during the winter, then, snow might be something that you have to account for in your packing and in your clothing. So figure out what the weather related items you will need to bring and make sure you pack those. One thing I always forget if I'm traveling on a plane, because I really need to write this down, is one of those neck pillows. I think those can make a big difference, especially if you're one who is able to sleep on a plane. So making little notes about what you could bring to make yourself more comfortable on a flight or more entertained or just happier. And that could also be, if you're traveling by car, do you need your road snacks, right? Or, that can work on a plane too. If you are not driving, is this, are you going to be expected to entertain the driver, or are they going to be like, read your book if you can read in the car without having car sickness? What are you going to do on the plane, right? Are you going to work? Are you going to read? Are you going to sleep? Are you going to visit? Going to make a new friend? Thinking about those things ahead of time can really help make the travel a lot better. So when you're packing, all the things. So I talked about the weather and weather related things. Also look at the conference schedule to see what the different opportunities for outfits are, and make sure you plan accordingly. If there's any extra things that you may want to attend, sometimes conferences have different sightseeing or tour kind of things that you could purchase separately. And, if you're going to want to go on those, what are you going to need to wear and what are you going to need to have? And a lot of times that's different from what you're going to wear for the conference itself. And separate from that, are you going to want to do anything? And do you need extra clothing or shoes for those type of things? Are you going to want to exercise? You want to make sure you bring your exercise clothes. Conferences rooms tend to be a little chilly. So even if it's really warm outside, you may want to bring a light sweater or jacket to make sure you're not freezing in a session. Those of us that have experienced that do not want to experience that again. A refillable water bottle is essential. We'll talk about this more in a minute, but taking care of your personal self and your health while at a conference is really important, and hydration is a big part of that. So, what are those types of things that you want to fix while packing? And what are your work things? What are your personal things? What are your entertainment type related things? And what else should you bring? So, the more thought you give to that, not the morning of the flight or the morning of the travel, the better off you're going to be, and the more you will not be saying, "Oh my gosh, I forgot this." So packing is huge. I mentioned earlier to look a little bit deeply at the conference program. I think that's really important to happy conferencing. Think ahead of time about, what are the sessions you want to make sure that you absolutely go to? Are those extra things something you want to deal with? Are there people in your life, related or unrelated to the conference, that you would want to see that live in that particular area? This particular conference that I'm at now, found out is not very far from my aunt and uncle, and so I'm going to get to see them, and I haven't seen them in a while and don't get to see them regularly. So I'm super happy I Googled the distance between where I am and where they live. So, is there, and if so, obviously you need to reach out ahead of time to make those plans, because usually, spontaneous things happen and that's amazing. But if we can plan ahead of time, we can make sure something happens. So if you are going to be doing things outside of the conference, a little sightseeing, which I highly recommend. Do you need tickets ahead of time? How are you going to deal with transportation? All of that. Think about that ahead of time so you can make sure that you get everything that you want out of the conference. And okay, so my notes just disappeared. Okay, there we go. And you can also consider volunteering. That's actually what I did at this particular conference. They sent out a note and said, "Who wants to be a volunteer moderator for a session?" And so volunteered to be a moderator for 3 sessions that I was going to anyway. So I might as well, help out. And that way I can get a chance to meet the speakers for sure. You don't have to do that though. Most conferences have lots of volunteer opportunities, whether check-in or traffic, direction or anything like that. If they don't actually ask for volunteers, you could reach out and say, "Hey, do you need anybody to help the day of?" Oftentimes, if we are going to a conference by ourselves, that might be a really nice way to get to meet people and have, a few friendly faces ahead of time if you are not going to know anyone. So the volunteer route is a good one. I've utilized that several times, not always, because sometimes you either don't want to or don't need to, but it's something I definitely want you to put in your toolbox to consider. If you're going with other people, especially if you're literally traveling specifically with them in a plane or on a car or whatever, I recommend, just having a little conversation ahead of time, right? Let's, what time are we going to leave? How many stops are we planning on making if it's the car? How soon do you feel comfortable getting to the airport? Are you the kind of person that, we need to be together all the time? Or, what are the needs of the individual person, right? If folks like to, go on for on their own for a while and maybe sometimes do stuff with the group, but not always, please respect that. If someone is, really, wanting to maybe be the coordinator, talk about, "Hey, yeah, we'd love to have you coordinate," or maybe we can share the coordination. Maybe we can, share where people are picking, the person who's picking for dinner. Just have a conversation about, travel personalities and, do you tend to be, really late, a little bit late, early? How do we know, what do we know about you so we can make sure that our traveling together is a really good experience for everyone. The group that I'm with right now is amazing. Never traveled with them before, and they have been awesome. And I hope that for all of you, every time you go to a conference with other people. Your health. And even if you're only gone for a few days, it is really easy to not be taking care of your health and that impact your conference experience. The number one thing when you're traveling, and this, is hydration. Especially if you're on a long plane flight, it's really easy to not drink enough water because maybe you don't want to get up to go to the restroom or you just don't have access to it. That's why that refillable water bottle is so important. And make sure that you are hydrating, make sure that you're drinking plenty of water. I don't know what the physiological reason for needing to drink extra water when you're traveling is, but particularly on plane flights, but even on cars, don't dehydrate yourself. Also, make sure you're consuming enough water, and make sure you're eating right. Try to eat as, nutritiously and fuel your body. Sometimes when we are at conferences, maybe you're eating different food or more rich food than you normally do. smaller amounts, bigger amounts. Try to keep it a little bit closer to what you do at home, so you don't have a stomach ache or, other things that can impact your fun and happiness. Alcohol. Everybody's going to have to make their own, rules for how much alcohol they consume. Just going to say that it's usually not a good idea to consume a lot of alcohol and then have to get up early the next day. Also, it's probably not a great idea at a professional conference. Again, you please make your own rules. I found it really interesting at this conference. Which has been really great, by the way. They had a reception where they had an open bar for the first hour, which I thought was really interesting. And it did not appear that anyone had overindulged, but I hadn't seen that before. And then afterwards, the bar was still open, but there was obviously a fee for the beverages. So make good choices. To quote Jamie Lee Curtis in Freaky Friday, the remake. Just obviously give that some thought to how it's going to affect the rest of your trip. Couple of tips in different sessions. So if you think that you are going to want to follow up with a speaker, it might be a good idea to ask a question in the session and then follow up shortly after that. So that way, maybe the person can remember, at least a little something about you, your organization or whatever. And then that can kind of help facilitate the follow-up conversation. I've actually never really thought about that as a strategy before, but I actually utilized that this morning. There was actually one of the sponsors who was doing a presentation, and I thought, oh my gosh, I think that would be a really amazing thing for Fresno State. So I raised my hand and, mentioned, I think twice, that I was from Fresno State and, would they be interested in having some conversations, and asked a question about their process or something. And then immediately, connected with this person on LinkedIn, and then I'm going to be following up later. And then hopefully that, I'll get a response and that'll be a little bit better connection. Sometimes you will go to a session and it's not what you thought, or it's just not good. Sometimes breakout sessions are amazing. Most of the time they are, but sometimes they're not. And if you've been to a lot of conferences, you know what I'm talking about. Not everything is a home run, right? That actually also happened to me during this conference. Again, most everything has been amazing. However, I did go to a session which wasn't at all what the title was. So I was a little bit disappointed. I also was sitting all the way in the front, so I couldn't leave. Sometimes if you sit down in a session and you notice right away that it's not really what you want and you can exit without too much, disruption, that's fine. We've all done that. Find another session, sneak in. But sometimes you can't, right? You're at the front like I was, and you know definitively that this is really not going to be the content that you were looking for. Don't just get on your email. No, it's not going to be the best use of your time because you're going to get to email later. I promise you're not going to forget. And this is conference time, right? This is time for you to be learning and thinking and processing and talking about big ideas and being inspired. And so what I did and what I recommend is you kind of keep half an eye, half an ear on the presentation. I had a notebook, a journal or notebook that I was writing in with a pencil or pen. And so it, did not look like I was ignoring this lovely woman. Obviously if I was clicking away on my laptop, that probably would not have been a good thing unless you could give her the auspices that you were actually taking copious notes, which is why I don't think checking email is really good or polite in a conference breakout session. Just my feelings. But with a notebook, right, you can do whatever you want. And so I took the time to kind of half listen, just in case there were some kernels of wisdom or pearls of wisdom that I could benefit from. And there were. But the majority of the time, I actually worked on fleshing out an idea that I had had in a previous session. I put a little bit more structure to it. I put a few action items down. These are things that normally I wouldn't have time to do at a conference. I would have to do later. And so I really took advantage of that, kind of unexpected time that dropped in my lap because I didn't have to really focus on the session that really wasn't something of value to me. So that's a little thought to not waste those sessions, even if they're not what you are expecting or wanting. You can still use it for conferencey stuff to move that inspiration and those ideas along. because often, those things aren't as easy. The time to do that is not as easily found after the conference. Take breaks. Please don't necessarily go, sun up to sundown conferencing. Even those of us that are extroverts need a little bit of break from peopling. If you are in a hotel room, the same place as your conference, which of course is ideal, at least once or twice, just go up to your room for a few minutes during a break. Just, have no one around just to kind of, refresh, refuel, or find a little corner and just kind of regroup a little bit. I find that the days that I do that are much happier than the days that I don't. So please make sure you're taking breaks. You're also allowed to, skip a session during the conference to give yourself a little time to regroup. Maybe there's work you have to do or whatever. I mean, you are there to do the conference, so please don't skip everything. But giving yourself a break when you need it is really, really important. Maybe there's a lunch thing that you can skip, right? And, just, I don't know, find yourself something else to eat or something. But make sure you are giving yourself breaks. Also, be open to learning something that you are not there for. Obviously, when you were planning to go to this conference, you were thinking, okay, this will be amazing. I will, hopefully learn things about this and that, right? You have like educational goals. I'm hopeful you have networking goals too. I'd really like to meet these kinds of people, or if I have a chance to share my stuff with these kinds of people, right? So you kind of have, again, that's part of that prep that we talked about. What are you wanting to accomplish? And as we are doing that, be open to being inspired or connected in a way that you hadn't anticipated. That's, I think, one of the most beautiful things about conferences is the unexpected light bulb. And I think it happens to us most of the time if we are open to it, right? That means that if you are part of a conversation and someone changes the conversation to something that maybe isn't your area, don't tune out, right? Listen. You might learn, you know, something that isn't is like an offshoot of what they're saying, right? Or what someone says reminds you of the most amazing idea. Don't tune out just because it's not your lane. I guess is the main message, because you might really, really get something from it. And I'm pretty sure you will if you are open to that. Um, Enjoy the city that you're in. Oftentimes, these are the only times that we'll ever get to these cities, or if you're fortunate enough to have a conference in another country. So make sure that you at least, get to know a little bit about it. Do just a little bit of touristy type things or getting to know the community. Full confession, I went through more than a decade of just being so focused on, I got to do what I need to do. I got to get home to my kids, that I didn't do hardly any of the seeing the city. And I regret that. And I'm really trying to, a little bit one evening, take advantage of those extra tours. Typically they're not too much money, which is great. And that way you have like an organized way to see something. In the past, I've done a lot of conferences by myself and haven't really felt comfortable exploring the city alone. But definitely, if there's a group opportunity, that makes it so much easier. So, at least say a little bit of the city. So when someone else is talking about it, you can say, oh, yeah, I had a conference there and I did this. And you can reflect on the fact that you also got to enjoy the geographical location a little bit. I think it's really important. And it's something, and again, me included, people don't realize the value of that. It also adds to sort of the overall balance of the experience. Conferences are very intense. There is so much information coming, and your brain is full, and your notebook is full, and all kinds of stuff is going on. Getting to do just a little bit of fun is a really good way to balance out your experience. So I highly recommend that too. And then when you get home, or better yet, before you leave, um, get your conference notes and your action items and your to-dos organized right away. I do have a colleague, actually my co-author Tori, that when we go to a conference together just about every year, and we try to stay an extra half day to have time to process our notes and our action items, because, and maybe it's just me. But sometimes it's hard to find some time to process those notes after you get back from a conference. And we all know that it's best to do that very soon afterwards. So if you can stay an extra few hours, or if that can be your priority in the airport or on the plane, to just do that. So that way, when you get back, you can actually utilize the information in a very more immediate way for the conference rather than waiting a month and then, translating your notes and maybe not understanding exactly what you're talking about. A good way to hold yourself accountable for this, if you're not able to do the extra half day and be very focused, is to either sometimes we have to, but if we don't, offer to do a little mini workshop or just a debrief of what you learned at the conference for your colleagues or your organization back home. So that way it forces you to organize your notes and kind of pull out the best practices. So that can be something very, very cool. So it kind of holds you accountable for doing that. But don't wait too long before you can take the good stuff that you've learned and put it into practice. If you can, take the time to process your notes each evening, that's obviously great. Sometimes we can't do that. We have to actually do our regular job or we're doing a sightseeing thing. But if you can do that, that's also great. The point is to not lose all of the beautiful inspiration and value that you've received at your conference. So I think those are my initial thoughts. So, how to conference, conferencing 101, productive conferencing. It takes, a little bit of intentionality and planning, just like everything does. And just, a little way, a couple ways of looking at things maybe slightly differently. And, figuring out what you want to accomplish, being open to accomplishing things that aren't on that list, seeing the city, meeting some new people. You don't have to make 400 new contacts when you go to a conference. I know a lot of people kind of put that pressure on attendees, make sure you network, blah, blah, blah. Networking is great. Please do it. But a few really good contacts I have found are more valuable, or at least just as valuable, than a whole bunch of kind of loose ones. So, don't feel so much pressure that you have to meet every single human. Try to meet some humans that you think you will be able to mutually, connect and help each other out. That's great. But you don't have to meet everybody. I think that's a lot of pressure. Again, even for us extroverts, that's just like a lot because conferences are a lot. So make sure that you are protecting not only your physical energy, but also your emotional and mental energy. And I think that's one way we can do that. I would love to know what you do to conference better. How have you successfully managed conferences and enjoyed them and also got everything that you wanted to out of them? I would love, love, love to know. I'm at Betsy Hayes on all social media, so please connect with me. Also, my website, which is under construction, but the email is still there, betsyahays.com, Betsy, the letter A, Hays.com. And please do the 3 R's: rate, review, and recommend the podcast, because that's how we meet. That's how we do meet, but also reach other people. So looking forward to hearing from you, and also looking forward to the next episode of Handled Ish. So until then, take care. And remember, you are doing way better than you think you are. Trust me.